All right. Welcome in, everyone. Can someone close that back door, please? Welcome everyone in person and online. I have a few housekeeping items. CEU tracking sheet. We have provided a CEU tracking sheet in the program. At the end of the workshop, we'll announce the participation confirmation word. Sorry, but we forgot to add a column to write it in, so just add it to the workshop title. Recording disclosure. Please note that we are recording this workshop. If you would rather be incognito, please turn off your camera and change your name or remove your name. We are not recording content from the break. I don't think we have any breakout sessions. So never mind. Closed captioning. You may notice at the top of your screen a red button that says live on Zoom with rev.com. This is our live closed captioning service, and it does not mean we are live streaming video anywhere publicly. If you would like to enable subtitles, click the closed caption button on your toolbar and select show subtitles. Conference comfort agreements. We ask participants to please honor the conference comfort agreements found on page 8 of your conference program. Peer support for peer support specialists. If at any time you need support, please let your virtual host or room attendant know, or visit peerapocalypse.com for a list of on-call peer support specialists. Questions and comments. We ask participants to keep themselves on mute. If you have questions or comments for presenters, please use the chat box. And here we go.
That's me, huh? All right. Who's ready to learn? Who's ready to be disappointed? No? Okay. All right. I guess we'll try and learn today. Welcome, everybody. My name is Bree Salen. I am here from Denver, Colorado. This is actually not my first Peer Apocalypse. I presented a couple years ago in 2018. Oh, Lord. Feels like 2008. And a lot has changed since then. So the purpose of this session today, every peer program is different. And though we are making a concentrated effort to gain more credibility and consistency in the peer profession, peer specialists are often so siloed. Not every peer specialist knows what to look for or to ask about their program. The hope is to empower each of you to own your place in your organization, even if you are the organization, build more connected and united peer teams, and advocate for your rights as employees in this revolutionary career path. So before I kind of get started, somebody had actually put in the Whova app asking a question like, how do we grow without becoming too professional? I loved that. Does anybody else feel that way? That fear of how do we do what we need to do and grow and gain credibility, but still remain peers at the heart of it. All right. I've been grappling with that for the last 4 years. There's no clear answer, but I can tell you I've been doing it for 4 years, and I don't anticipate that's going to change. But what it boils down to is that you guys have so much more knowledge and power than you think you do in these different organizations. Like I said, everybody is a little bit different. I've never been able to find two programs that are exactly the same. So I'm going to be sharing a lot about my program and my experience, and hopefully there's going to be little bits and pieces that sound familiar and you might be able to bring back to what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish.
I hate to interject. Can we see the presenter?
No.
No. All we get to see is the
I'm just kidding. How can I?
Thank you, Bree.
Full disclosure, half my team from Denver is probably on this call, so they might just
Yeah,
be
I know, I'm
trolling
the one
me.
begging you.
Yes, we are.
Yes, they are. There they are.
Yeah, we want to see you in action.
All right. So, like I said, I came here in 2018 and I presented on the impact of sexual assault. So, really easy breezy, no worries, all that kind of stuff. 2 weeks later, I got married. So kind of like a, quick thing there. 10 months later, I had my first baby. 9 months ago, I had my second baby. And to say that as intimidating as some of this material can sound, there is nothing special about me as an individual, that I don't have any special education. I don't have any incredible work experience. I wasn't working myself to the bone. I had other things to do. So I was able to create this program over the last 4 years while living a totally normal life and looking like a fool all the time. So if you ever feel intimidated by anything, just remember, this is who you're talking to. So a little background on what my program is currently doing. So we started out in, I have to get my notes back up here. We started in 2018 as a team of 5, and those 5 peer specialists were serving our 2 state institutes. In 2019, my department won a second state contract, and the team grew to 7. By the end of that year, we got a new peer specialist on what we call the Western Slope. We don't know. It's a very rural area, and we've never had a peer specialist over that way to extend. We've always been a statewide contract, but we didn't have anybody to serve from a peer specialist perspective outside of really the Denver metro area. So that was really exciting. In 2020, we added a peer specialist supervisor and 2 additional peer specialists. Now we are a team of 14 peer specialists. We have 2 peer specialist supervisors, a training specialist, and myself as the program manager. So we've tripled in growth over the last couple of years and only going upward, which is really exciting. So since I only went back as far as January of 2021, and my folks, this team, they've served over 450 individuals with one-to-one peer support and one-to-one family support. So they're incredible. These folks are working out of the state psychiatric hospital still. They are also in acute hospitals, including our youth and children specific hospitals, supporting people that are coming out of detox withdrawal management programs, CSUs, emergency rooms. We're also serving forensic programs. So these outpatient restoration, we're getting connected with people while they're still in jail and helping them figure out what life looks like for them. Youth and residential treatment programs. Our program in particular, we work alongside clinical care managers. So while the clinical care managers are doing, benefits acquisitions, getting housing, we're walking alongside and providing that peer support on the journey. But our peer specialists are working alongside social workers, PCPs, psychiatrists, therapists, assisted living, all that fun stuff. So they're a little bit everywhere, all over the state of Colorado, and they do amazing at it. So my boss asked me a little while ago, when I came back from maternity leave this past September, she's like, what's the secret sauce? What makes your team work? Because they're struggling on the care management side with getting enough referrals, keeping people on the team, people feeling burnt out. She's like, why is it not working? What's happening? Why is it working for you? Why is it not working for us? And she wouldn't let me get away with, be like, oh, I just have a great team. She's like, well, how did you get a great team? Well, I'm just not an asshole. And she's like, well, that's not going to work either. So I really had to think about it. And that's also when I saw the call for presenters for this conference. And I was like, okay, I think I know enough about what I'm doing. I'll go and submit. So I did that. 4 weeks later, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. So then I spent the next 5 months being like, I'm full of shit. I don't know anything. And imposter syndrome, poster child, still that way. I'm sure other people can relate. But what it boils down to is that I do know what I'm doing. We all know what we're doing. And I think that is such a huge barrier that we don't always acknowledge. Sometimes we get in our own way, that we don't own what we know, because we're in these other spaces with people who have degrees, who have whatever. I mean, I was reading even the bios of other presenters here. I'm like, oh, they sound so much more impressive than me. I made a big joke in my bio. No one's going to take me seriously. That's okay. Don't take me seriously. But I do know what makes it work. And so kind of came up with these 3 sections of what has made my program successful. So the first is asking questions, finding and filling the vacuums and power vacuums, take over the world. And then setting the standards for what peer support looks like. So this is going to be a lot more collaborative and interactive. You have all the knowledge that you're going to need. And so we're just going to pull it out and learn from each other. So the first is taking an assessment of looking, how did we get here? Think about your program as it is now. Asking yourself these questions. Where does my peer program fit in? Who makes the decisions about my peer program? How is my program funded? And how did my program come to be? So take a couple minutes, think about it, kind of share in your general area. Does anybody know each other in here? Probably. Talk with some of your colleagues, answer some of these questions, and I'll come back in a couple of minutes and ask for some feedback about the history of your programs. Chat. They don't need to see. Right. Can do that.
Well, not today, but he's doing this. Yeah, okay. I just thought you were young. I was gonna connect with you because I never met her. So my mistake. I thought she left.
All right. We're going to come back as a group. You'll still get more opportunity to chat. And that was more than 30 seconds. Sorry. So in our chat, we got some great answers. And this is really, this is for my benefit, as I'm really interested to see where you're all at. 'Cause I have, you know, some really, hopefully good ideas. We'll see. But knowing where you're starting, because you're all going to be in vastly different areas. So we've got some folks who they're the only peer in their program. They're recovery ally in a behavioral healthcare system. They're doing community outreach. I think we're in the early stages. Some people are much more established, but looks like a lot of developing. So in this room, who feels like they're in their early stages of their program development? Like early stages. Who feels like they've got their feet under them a little bit more, operating for a couple of years? You know, generally the answers to these questions at the top. Who knows everything can answer that for their program, all of those questions. Okay. All right, so we're a good mix. Perfect. So this is going to be relevant. Some of it's going to be relevant to you. Some of it's probably not going to be relevant to you. So bear with me and know we're all learning here. So I'd love to hear from some of you. Answer some of these questions. What's your funding like? How did your program come to be? Who's making the decisions about your peer program? I'd love to hear from you. Yes. Great. Our mic's not working, so I apologize. Yeah. State funded. Fantastic. Great. Yeah. So we'll bring the mic to you if you want to share. Right over this way.
Just for the people on Zoom to hear you as well.
All right, so we're funded through the state of Washington through the True Blood grant, and there's several different programs that are run through that. I participate in the FHARPS, but there's also the FPATH. There's also OCRP. Healthcare Authority basically oversees that, so they track it. A lot of the decisions are made at the state level, but funding wise, yeah, it comes at the state.
Who gets to, oh, get perfect. We're over here.
So we work for the Peer Connect program at the Alano Club of Portland. Alano Club has been around for a very long time. And our board of directors and our executive director saw the need, an underserved population, which is everyone. We're like the lowest barrier program in the Portland metro area. There are no specific criteria needed to be a participant in our program. And our funding comes from state, federal, OHA, kind of all over the place. Luckily, our ED is a fantastic grant writer. And there's like always new avenues being explored for that. And the decision-making is a work in progress.
So my program is in a regular agency in Heppner, Oregon. And our little part of it, there's two parts of it. One is the warm line, and I work for the senior outreach. And it came to be because we saw a need on the warm line and started hearing seniors really needed help. So we created this program. It's funded by state, as well as now it's got the federal funding, the ARPA funding is coming through for it. We think, okay, better not say that. And and counties, because people are seeing more and more of a need for older adult support. And I just want to say it's really interesting to be like an oasis of peer managed, supported, completely supported thing in a regular agency. And so we get the peer stuff, the peer well-being supported by that.
Awesome. We had one more right in the back, and then we'll move forward.
I'm also on the David Rumphrey Oregon Warm Line, and I cannot say enough about the program. It's based in Oregon, but we are attainable anywhere. And we do get calls from everywhere. So
One more real quick. No?
No? Yes.
I just wanted to endorse these folks who are from Heppner. Wonderful program, and it's very unique because the administrator, Kimberly, is amazing and really facilitates, even though she's not a person who claims lived experience, but understands it perfectly.
Thank
I love
you
that.
all.
I love finding the champions of other programs in here. Yeah.
I work for a clinic called New Options for human trafficking survivors. We're funded through the state and federal Multnomah County Police Department is where my position is paid as a peer through there. An underserved population. And then I also work with Transcending Hope, and our program runs off rents right now for housing and stability.
Fantastic. So a little bit of everything, right? And so my next question is probably one that might be a little uncomfortable. What gets in the way of your program working the way that you want it to work? Funding? Siloed funding. Meaning you're getting funding from different places, and so the requirements might be different. You might be having to meet A's requirements and B's and trying to figure out what that looks like. So maybe you have to adjust staffing. What was staffing? What were the problems with staffing? Volunteers, right? So you don't have the funding to pay for people. Yeah. Lack of technology. Hyper focus on contract numbers. That's what somebody has in here. Broken systems. See, constantly remind everyone in my organization what my role is. Yes. Right. Yes. So limited criteria. Yeah, that we can't reach everywhere. These are all big things. And I think we're all feeling the same frustrations. This is what I mean with like peer work is being so siloed. And I know it's not just us. I know care management deals with a lot of the same thing. But I also think we as peer providers have the insight and the tools to overcome all of these barriers, that our perspective we don't have to put up with the crap, that we can insert ourselves in a different way than is the norm. Moving on to this next one. Sorry, I'm trying to move this and I can't. Oh, there we go. So if you don't have the answers, a lot of you do, but maybe some of you don't. These are really important things for you to know. And I encourage you to feel empowered and find out who you can ask. Start with your direct supervisors. If they don't have the questions, ask them to help you figure out who does. programs don't usually last without champions. So as strong as we are as peer support providers, we're not enough of everywhere that our voice continues to carry. So I can think of so many programs that got their start because someone in a clinical role understood the value of peer support. Fantastic. They want to get the funding, they do the grants, they do all this stuff, they do the setup, and then they leave. So who is the champion? Who's managing that? You have your peer specialists who are used to one way, maybe that turnover and not being able to do peer support the way that we want it to so much. So maybe you start to lose people, and then that knowledge, that solid foundation just gets diluted until maybe you get somebody else who gets it and then can kind of come and clean up. And we need to get that out of the hands of that clinical perspective. We need to own it and say, this is our program. We're going to run it. And so that is the stuff that is brought down. Thank you. Thank you. No. My favorite thing is just because it currently is, doesn't mean it always needs to be that way. I know I've gotten really overwhelmed and really bummed out thinking the systems are so broken. This is exhausting. I feel like I'm just slamming my head against a wall every single day. But there are these small wins. And that's what we're going to kind of go over next. Pro tip, your team of peer specialists will always have the best ideas, the better ideas of what to change. So if you're looking for what can we improve, ask your peer specialist, ask your team. That is what is going to last. That is what is going to make the change. You don't need to ask these people who've been there or not in the peer role. They don't know what it's going to take for your peer program to last. Ask who's doing the work. All right, bring your own chair. So for those of you who are providing direct support, what are the meetings looking like that you attend? What support do you get? And you're doing your direct, one-to-one support or whatever like that. What do your staffing meetings look like? Where else are you represented in your organization? Yeah. Able to have like we also are able to be person on staff. We are asked to speak on how welfare services and like meetings. There's a new thing that we have. So we're able to speak on things that and be able to give the work parent perspective of how it was for us when our parents were there, and then also what kind of perspective they want. We also family service time, a video like a panel, so to be able to kind of help this kind of like rewording things, making more exciting, and also to encourage engagement from parents, not to be discouraged or even trying to do something. So our agency or nonprofit work for they are constantly along. I love that. Who else feels that way? Who else is invited to the table? Some. Yep. Who's not invited to the table? A little bit everything. That's the thing. Yeah. What I was trying to get through there is that there are places that these decisions are being made without us, right? If you are state funded, what are those contracts? Who's writing those contracts and where's the peer voice? Who's helping to decide, who's having the voice to say, this is what peer work actually is? How is that informing the work? Who is making those decisions? What tables are we not at that we need to be? Somebody said, nobody knows what my job is. People always forget. So how are you continually like marketing yourself? As turnover happens, how are you establishing your peer program so that's not an afterthought, so that it's not the small little thing on the side? Oh, and we also have peer specialists. Now you're saying we have a peer program. So these are a few ideas of how to get yourself out there and some of the tables that you can be showing up at. Provider meet and greet. So if your team is out looking for referrals, go meet these referral sources, be part of those conversations of pitching like this. As if you're working alongside some other services, say, this is what this team is doing. This is what my team is doing. Community company lunch and learns, get out in your communities. People are always looking for these opportunities. I think at like staffing meetings, I've seen people just trying to plan them, thinking, oh, nobody wants to listen to this. We don't know what to say. I don't want to do it. Show up and say, hey, our next staffing meeting, I'd love to take 10, 15 minutes and talk about the peer program. I'd like to talk about some of our successes. New employee orientation, talking with your HR department, saying as new people are coming on and learning about the program, are we part of that conversation? Are you telling everybody who's in this organization that this is something that we also provide? Company newsletters, email updates, blasts. So this has become a tradition in my organization. So Global Peer Support Day, right? Third Thursday in October. So every year, my company does this email blast where they send it to everybody. This is what Global Peer Support Day is. These are our peer support specialists in our organization. And so keeping that visibility going. Program reports, board stakeholder meetings. I've been to board meetings. I've presented there. Staffing booths at community events, conferences, job fairs. People don't always think to have us come anyways, right? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. This is a collaborative learning environment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This keeps freezing up in me. Sorry, I can't keep. Oh, I can just do that. Yes, absolutely. So again, we're all at a little bit different because yeah, we've got people who are just starting out. We've got people who've been doing this for a while. So we're going to kind of branch off here. So we're going to quickly go over, if you know these answers, if you've got something established, you got to keep showing your work. If you want to stay funded, if you want to stay in charge, what are some of the things you can do to continue your program? If you don't have those answers, get to work and we'll talk about some of those things that you can do. All right, so we're going to come to showing your work. So data collection. If you're not paying attention to this kind of stuff, or you don't know where to start with your own work. Track what you're doing. Can be really, really simple. How many people are you seeing every day? What are your general outcomes? You don't need to get really specific. My team in particular, we document very, very vaguely, which my clinical side, they really hate that, but they deal with it. So we make sure that we capture the measures that we know are important. So we're doing these, oh, that's a different one. How do we know that we're successful? So having these conversations, working with your team, this should be part of your regular team meeting with your peer specialist, not just how everybody's doing, how are you doing as a peer specialist? How are you supporting? How do we know we're being successful? Who needs to know what we're doing? Who are we reporting to? Are they getting the right information? Where are the knowledge and data gaps? Who are we missing and why? So another huge thing is not just tracking what you are doing, being able to show what you can't get done because there's not enough funding, there's not enough staffing. So for example, we had nobody on the Western Slope. I kind of mentioned that earlier. So I tracked for a 6-month period. I tracked all the referrals that came in that we couldn't provide peer support to because they were out of our service area. And it only took 6 months. And I said, we were missing hundreds of people. Like obviously one person couldn't sustain that. But I was like, we got to get this, we've got to get this going. We are missing people every single day. And so that kind of lit the fire of like, okay, how are we going to make this happen? That became a priority. People really do respond to the heart of peer support. I think that's why we have been able to move forward and grow as much as we have, because we do tug on those heartstrings. We know like this is really important work, but it's connecting the heart with the head. And that's where this kind of data piece comes in. How can we objectively show why we're successful and how we're being successful? That's going to get you more champions, more buy-in in the long run and keep you growing. So here's a quick case study. Assess what your program is saying, that you have 3 peer specialists and you're expected to do this. So average caseload, what is everybody's average caseload about in here? Shout out some numbers. 25, 50. Ugh. 15 to 18? 15 to 18? Yep. Mhm. And who is sacrificing their own wellness to make sure those people are getting served? Yeah, you gotta stop. We'll come to that. I think there's also some self-sabotage that goes on here, is that we are such compassionate, empathetic people that we are doing everything we can to capture these folks. But what that is doing is telling the system that we can absorb the work. It's not saying, no, we need more people, we need more funding. So we're kind of getting in our own way. So saying no is really important. And I know that's going to feel like shit, you guys. I know that, with your boundaries, turning off your phone, shutting down your computer, we have to be empowered to say what we do is important and we deserve to be boundaried, protected, paid well, that we're not doing this for free. Yes, we do it out of the goodness of our hearts, but if we can get paid for it, we should get paid for it. So this basic, really look and see what your organization is asking of you. So this quick example, if we have an average caseload of 12, we have 3 peer specialists. At any given time, we have a max capacity of 36. How many people are eligible for services? So if you have about 75 people per month, and I'm big about choice, not everybody gets a peer specialist. They get to ask, they get to accept or decline. So even if, 75 people a month are eligible, only about half, opt into it. That's still about 37 people every month. Then what's your length of stay? So if you're averaging working with people for 3 months, say, that capacity isn't available to take in that constant recurring, that constant recurring influx of individuals. So being able to calculate what are you asking? This is what's coming in, is that 112 people are not getting services because we only have this capacity. So instead of we just need to bump up caseloads, that's 112 people that need the services. We don't need to spread that out amongst 3 people. Say, no, this is what we need. This is what's reasonable for a peer specialist. And again, that's why, you heard the disparity in caseloads. You've got 500, 50, 18, 15, 12, 10, 40. It is so all over the place. And we don't have to contribute to that continuing to be a part of the equation. We can say not sustainable. And as you're experiencing turnover, as people are leaving jobs, ask those things of your teammates and report back to your supervisors. Be real about it. Say, I know they left because they had a 60-person caseload. That is ridiculous. We cannot do what we need to do and have this unrealistic expectation put on our plate. And the really crappy thing is, we don't have an established kind of workforce code yet as peer support specialists. Again, I think even case management and clinical work, social workers, they're overloaded all the time too. And so we, as a newer profession, I think we can take this opportunity to really put our feet down and be like, no, we're not going to buy into this grind, because the money is there. I know people say budget short. If I've learned anything in the last few years, the money is there. You just got to know how to ask for it, or just keep being really, really persistent and annoying. So I get really good at that. So being able to kind of capture this data, even if it's your own. So this is a very rudimentary, Peter hates me, early tracking. It's really ugly. Sorry for those of you who are really good at things like Excel. I showed this to a data analyst once and he literally gagged. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm doing the best that I can. But I was just tracking how each of my peer specialists were doing their work. How often were they meeting with folks? How many contacts were they having? And you can see what are the averages? 368 contacts were happening between this many people. So I just got to build and build and build. So it can be really simple. So if you don't know where to start, just start with yourself, track over a period of time. I don't do this anymore. It's all automated for me now, which is really exciting. Simple self-report surveys. As part of your work with your peer specialists, I know we all kind of have our own contractual obligations, things we're probably supposed to do with our peers, but really it should be a part of the conversation. What is different for the people we're serving because they have a peer specialist? So being able to get that real feedback from the people that we're serving is so, so important. That's what people want to hear. That's what stakeholders want to hear, is what is effective about the services, right from the horse's mouth. So be asking that question and being able to track it. Just have, we're looking at moving our system to having like the 12 general peer supportive services. So like resource finding, housing research, healthy relationship building, skill building. And we're kind of tracking every time we meet with somebody, what are the things that we kind of talk about. And so being able just to kind of be like, well, with this individual, we talked about housing 8 times in a 3-month period. Do they have housing? Yes or no? So maybe we need to look at what conversations are we having? Are we not having? What do we as peer specialists need to know more of? What questions are we being asked? So you kind of see these trends of what do our people really need? And other people can look at that, but since we're the ones delivering that, we need to take ownership of that and make sure that that's what we're giving back to the communities. We don't need to rely on the outside or these contracts to determine what that work looks like. We're doing it. We should be able to decide the direction. What is the gap between expected outcomes and actual outcomes? Again, being able to kind of see what is expected of us, what's actually happening, and what's getting in the way. What are the barriers? Again, is it funding? Is it burnout? Is it this contract up, somebody's spending 20 minutes after every single session filling out this ridiculous form. Is that really effective? What are we missing? What is a practice that we're doing that is taking up our time that isn't actually helpful? This don't get stuck in the weeds, knowing the apples from the oranges. So this is something I've struggled with, is knowing what's case management, right? What are the checklists and what is the peer support? And we can get blue in the face going round and round and round, and rely on your instincts as a peer specialist. If you're not sure if it's important or relevant information, it probably isn't, and that's okay. I've had to sit in a room full of clinicians and stakeholders, and they've asked questions like, being able to like quantify, like why exactly are the peer specialists doing? Can you give us a checklist? Are we doing this every single time? I don't want to do that. That's not individualized peer service. I'm not going to do the same exact thing with somebody every single time. So pushing back, I have to apologize to my team at home. I had to give in a little bit on this care planning thing a little while ago. Somebody was badgering me for about 2 years about our peer specialists being a part of a care plan in our electronic health record keeping system. And I finally gave in just to get this person off my back, but they left. I outlasted them. And I was like, this is taking up time that we don't actually have. This is meeting someone else's need. This is not doing anything for our peer specialists. So let's not keep doing it. And luckily I had the support of my supervisor, and she was very hands-off. She's like, you do what you need to do. But we make mistakes and we try things out. And sometimes you got to play the game a little bit, right? So if they're asking something of you, try it, then show them why it doesn't work and show them what can work instead. All right, so that's if you're already doing the work, right? So what if you're starting earlier on? A big part, somebody's trying to get in. Hiring. These are such important questions. Who's writing the job description? Is it an accurate reflection of the work and the responsibilities? How are the candidates being screened? Who's looking at those? Who is making the decision about who to pass on to phone screens or first interviews? Who's involved in the hiring process in here with your teams? A few. Who wrote your interview questions and your job descriptions? You helped? Helped? You did? You did? Fantastic. Yes. So start there. If you really don't know where to start, ask who is writing the job description. Is it true? Is there stuff in there that shouldn't be? Have those conversations, call it out, get with your supervisor, say this isn't realistic, have those conversations. What does your interview process look like? Who's making those hiring decisions for those of you who are helping with the job descriptions? You're doing most of the hiring? The team, so it's a team kind of decision. That's fantastic. Who has absolutely no say in the hiring process of growing your team, your special? Just one? Oh, I'll give you a hug later because that really sucks. Yes, the slides will be available. What we do, I always started, obviously I wrote our job description and our interview questions and everything, and we're going to go over some ideas for interview questions if that's something that you feel would be beneficial for your program. But we absolutely have a process that it starts with me, and my first interview is super informal because really you can find a peer specialist, a really incredible peer specialist who has never worked a day in the behavioral health field. So learning how to look through those applications and find these relevant skills, these transferable skills is really important. So if you as a team are not getting eyes on these applications, ask to be part of that process because you can where you've been, you know how you got here, and you can start to see, other people's stories following a similar path. I've hired people who have never held a stable job before, that this is really their first job, and they've been some of the absolute best peer specialists I could have asked for. I've had people who've been fully trained and been working as a peer specialist, but are really a case aide kind of a thing. And it's been really hard to get them to go back into their role. So as you know what you're doing, you know what your role requires. So if you're not part of that process, get in there. So people start with me usually, and I make it as informal as possible. I make lots of awkward jokes and just try and be like, who are you as a person? This is who I am. This is what brought you to this. And some people get super freaked out. And I'm like, you're probably not going to be a great fit here because this is just how we are all the time. But if they do, if there's something about them and I'm like, okay, let's move this to a team interview. I rely so much on my team to do these panel interviews. And I know they probably hate it. They're probably really burnt out because we grow so much and we're always interviewing. But their insight is so invaluable. And it not only helps the team get to know who might be coming on board, it also gets the potential candidates to really get a sense of who they're going to be working with. We want this to be a mutually beneficial relationship, right? You want people to feel like they're part of this team, that they have a say, that they know what they're getting into, and who better to learn that from than the people who are actually doing it. So here is a quick view at, this is like our general job description for our peer support specialist roles, but I highlighted my favorite part, this or similar role. You can get away with so much with this kind of language, right? So if you've got organizations who are saying like, we want people who are already certified, we want people with this much experience, push back a little bit because there is so much that can be, in customer service. I have so much respect for people who work in the service industry. They make excellent peer specialists because they can hold that space. They can stay even tempered. They can have really solid boundaries. So advocating for that. Another thing I have to mention is know your organization's policy and hiring folks with a criminal justice involved background. Be willing to go to bat for them because they are absolutely going to be some of the best people you can have on your team. I've had to do that recently. I didn't think it was a big deal. I happened to hire a couple people in a row and our HR department was kind of like, what are they doing? And I was like, I know what I'm doing. I thought I was going to get in trouble because our HR, they sent out, we're not really comfortable with this candidate because of this history and it's not as far back as we wanted. And I was like, with all due respect, I don't care what you think. Sorry, but I know that I've interviewed this person. My judgment, the judgment of my team is what matters, not somebody from the outside and your liability. You've got to trust that we've built this team, that we can take care of them, that we can train them, that we hold that expertise. So let us do our jobs. All right. Questions that elicit the answers you need and inform about the role. So there are, I mean, you can Google and find what are the best interview questions. What I want to empower you to do is really sit down with your team and think of what do we need to know about folks? What are we looking for? And creating questions around that. So these are some general ones and I'll run through them a little bit. So what are you looking forward to most about this position? This is where you're going to find out if you're trying to hire someone from a clinical view or from a peer perspective, or somebody who really has no idea what they're talking about. That's okay. I've had people come say, I really don't know. I just know that I wish somebody had been along on the journey with me. And that's what this sounds like. I've had other people say, oh, I just really want to help people. And I usually ask a few more questions because helpers do not necessarily mean peer specialists. And that's really important to get at. What are the biggest challenges you anticipate you'll face in this role? So getting a sense of what they understand about the role, getting a sense of who they are as an individual, what they think is a challenge. If it's like cold calling, that's something I'm really not comfortable with. If that's a huge part of the job, might not be the best fit. Ask some further questions. Talking about specific things like compassion fatigue and vicarious and secondary trauma, get at the real stuff. Be honest about what this role entails. I do love this last one. The most important part of our job as peers is safely and effectively disclosing our lived experiences with mental health and or substance misuse to build authentic relationships with those we serve. What is your comfortability with sharing your story? Do you feel you're at a place in your recovery where you can look back and create a narrative around your recovery journey? Because we've got people all over the place that come to us. Everybody is in their own recovery journey, and some people aren't there yet, and that is perfectly fine. Being able to ask those questions and give some feedback around that. You know, I don't mind if people cry in interviews. I cry in other people's interviews. That's just kind of who I am. But it's like, can I sense, is this somebody who probably needs a little bit more time, that they're going to get lost really quick, and I can provide that, like maybe spend a little more time. What does your self-care look like? Asking some of those more in-depth involved questions to get a sense of where they really are. Some people do not know that they can share their story in an interview, right? You've got some people who it's totally out of the norm for them, that it doesn't feel like this is a job interview. I shouldn't be talking about these really dark and hard things. So that's why I try and give a little bit. Sometimes usually disclose bits and pieces of my story, because if there's somebody who just isn't used to being vulnerable versus somebody who's unwilling to be vulnerable. So you got to ask, yeah, big difference. We just had an interview like this, and that was something we kept kind of like throwing softballs, and she just kind of kept hitting them like in a way that wasn't really effective. And we stopped, and I was like, she wouldn't get into it. You know, we tried to make it as safe and as comfortable of a space for her to disclose and share what's going to make you good at this job. What is it about you that other people are going to connect to? And it was all very service answers. Well, I'm a good listener. You know, people come to me for help. I'm like, okay, a lot of people can say that. What else? What else? And if you don't give me that, you're probably not the right fit. And again, that's okay. Another huge piece, scenario questions. Who uses scenario questions in their interview process? Few? Good. This is another fantastic tool to use. Use your team. Come up with really difficult or really common situations that your team faces. So you're working with someone who's very clearly responding to internal stimuli, hearing voices, for example. How do you respond? You're going to have some people who know exactly what to do. Be like, I'm going to hold the space for them, make sure they're safe, just chat with them and see what they need from me. Other people are like, they need to call and get on better beds. And I'm like, no. No, please no. So getting a sense of how are they comfortable, or what's their comfortability with standing up to authority figures? What's their comfortability with mandated reporting, with difficult topics like suicidality? Where's my next one? Oh, this computer really does not like me. There we go. You are meeting a peer in the community and encounter something that doesn't feel right. You step away to call for support, but are unable to contact your supervisor or their coworkers. What do? Are you going to have somebody who puts themselves at risk? Or are you going to have somebody that sets good boundaries for themselves? I love some of these questions. Like these, they're really kind of like diagnostic tools. It's like, who are you as an individual? You don't have to have the know-how, the knowledge on how to deal with these, but what are your instincts telling you? And it helps with kind of understanding where people currently are and maybe where some training gaps are so that you can tailor that as they're coming on board. And being able, we have conversations after our interview panel, and we reference these questions all the time, and we can say, ooh, they didn't know how to answer that. But even they said, I've never come across, I'd be interested to know what you guys do or what your policy is. I love when people don't have the answers because it means that they're open and they're willing. So being able to know what you are looking for and tailoring your questions as you're screening and getting people on your team is a really, really great tool to creating the team that you need and a really strong team. Training. What does your onboarding and training look like? We always kind of had a joke, you know, if you can make it 6-9 months in your first peer specialist role, you're probably good for a while, because we saw so much burnout and drop off in about that 6 to 9 month range. I've seen a few head nods, like that's the real test. So figuring out, is it we just don't have the right training, or is it back to kind of this hiring problem? So getting a sense of what your new employees need, what your team needs, who's determining what that looks like. Do you just kind of have like a set, HR sends out the schedule, they have to watch these videos, or is there job shadowing involved? How much of that? When do they start to get a caseload? Who is informing those decisions? Is it you? Is it somebody who's not doing the work? What are your experiences? In the back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So what can we do about it? Exactly. Mm-hmm. Being honest with your feedback. Be rebel rousers. Tell them it's not working. But nobody really likes to be told they're not doing something right and then just be left to it. Sometimes we have to go that extra mile and kind of say, this is what's ideal. So creating your own schedule, showing people what needs to be done. So we have a kind of a general outline where we plug things in, but we make shadowing a huge part. We decided what the curriculum looks like. There was nobody to really kind of guide or direct, but we've got it down now. So we knew the most important things were really understanding the peer role within the context of our organization and our contracts. Self-care and wellness should always be a big thing. That's not, you know, these bubble baths. What does it actually look like? What is this daily maintenance? This is the stuff you need to figure out right at the get-go. Connecting remotely with your peers, that's been a big one since COVID. We were all in person and then suddenly we were not. I'm sure a lot of people in here can identify with that as well. But learning from each other, like I'm not just going to throw somebody to the wolves and say, okay, here's a bunch of people you should contact. Like, oh, that doesn't really help me. So letting them sit with people who have actually been doing this, what makes them successful? Who's that one person at this one jail that you can call and get something scheduled? What happens if the team 5 unit on the psychiatric floor doesn't answer? Who can you call as a backup? So you know these answers. And so how much of that training is focused on that actual kind of like day-to-day stuff? Oh, we're getting there. So owning that training, And I know it can be really frustrating, feeling like I'm not getting paid for this. Like this gets in the way of my own work. And I empathize with you. I really and truly do. It sucks kind of being the starting point. But no, you're not alone in it. And if you need support, look at this room. There's lots of people who've probably been where you have been. I think we get so, again, it's so in our own way thinking we have to figure it out or the burden falls to us. But we need to continue to connect as a peer workforce, not just as individual programs, but as like a workforce. Think of how things get done, like not necessarily like unionizing, but I think of like nurses and how they've had to, they use their numbers, they strike, they make sure that they take care of each other. That I think we are so siloed in how are we coming together? How are we learning from one another? And so making that a priority. Where are we at with time? Okay. The next big one. I loved this question. The supervision. So again, gonna do a raise of hands. Who is supervised by a peer identified individual? Okay. Some. Who's supervised by a clinician? Both? 2. Who's not supervised at all? Yeah. That happens. So somebody who had asked this question, they might be in here. I don't even know. They might be, but there seem to be, these requirement barriers for supervisors, right? That they need to have a certain education or certain experience. It's usually education, right? Associates, bachelors, whatever, right? So what barriers are you seeing to moving up to like the supervisory level?
I don't have, I'm sorry.
Oh, what'd you think I was?
I just have the barrier of, because I work part-time for another nonprofit and my supervisor is a clinician and I see it as a human care. That's not role
Mm-hmm.
and that's not supported by my supervisor.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, getting passed over by people who have clinical backgrounds, experience. Yeah. Do you want a brain surgeon supervising a heart surgeon, or do you want a heart surgeon supervising a heart surgeon? Right. Absolutely. So saying that, telling your supervisor, saying, if they're a clinician, being like, I honor your experience, but I don't think that where you're coming from is really going to answer this. So can I do this? Can I talk to some other people? Can I encourage you? Can I share some resources about what supervising a peer looks like? They don't know what they don't know. We have to be our own advocates. I see this all the time that, yeah, we kind of just suffer in silence. It's like, I'm not getting the support that I need. They don't know what support that we need. So how are we verbalizing that? How are we saying, this is what I need from a peer supervisor, and who are we holding accountable? And if they're not going to be holding accountable, keep throwing a fit. Seriously, you're not going to get anywhere if you just kind of continue to like, let it happen and let it happen. I think a lot of people are afraid of losing the opportunity to be a peer support specialist. So we put up with a lot of crap. Right, that we know these people need us, so we're willing to put up with a whole lot of stuff. Can't keep doing that. We really can't. I see a hand in the back. I'd love to hear from you. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Gross. Ugh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Know your value, know your worth. That if you are in organizations that are receptive to that, keep pushing, keep pushing. But if you feel like you are just hitting over and over again, you don't deserve that. I'm not telling you to quit your job, but leave. There's always going to be a better organization, because that's how change happens. If they can't keep good, 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 fantastic. But be real about that. I always do exit interviews. Like, I haven't lost somebody to this kind of stuff in a long time, because we take care of it. We are constantly asking for that feedback. And from a peer perspective, I was doing this before I was a program manager. As I was working direct peer support, I was acting as a mentor and a trainer for other folks. And I was like, tell me what the problem is. That it's my responsibility. If I want to continue to be able to do my job, I need my team to be able to do their job as well. So if it's not working for them, what can I help to do? And how can I kind of leverage that? Like, you don't know, as a, if you're a clinical supervisor, if you don't know, I know. So what are you going to give me? What are you going to give me if you want me to do this? Pardon? Certain amount of trust. Absolutely. That you show up, you do your work, and that's going to be noticed. And you stick around. Sometimes I think we are at a point, a lot of people do kind of stick around and take the abuse a lot of the time. And I get that. I've been there. But also it's a balance, right? If they're not willing to trust, how long are you going to outlast somebody? So that's your own individual journey, but no, you'd be supported in this workforce, and know that the choices that you make and what you're willing to put up with. We've been talking about this gap between our expectations and what we tolerate. Right? And so we need to continue to close that gap in this peer profession, that we know what we want to happen, but what are we allowing to happen? And how is that going to change? Sometimes it just comes down to what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to tolerate any longer. I saw some hands in the back. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see people in the back. Fantastic. So they're kind of talking about background checks. I know folks in the chat are kind of what's with the wandering guy with the microphone? Go wander. Go wander. But that's a great question. So what I'd encourage you, hopefully you do get some great resources, but ask the hiring team, ask, why is this part of our program? What's the fear here? Why can't we? What's getting in the way? Can we have a conversation? Can we, if this contract's being written, when's the next time it's going to be written up? Can we be at the table when they're determining what these restrictions are?
They're the ones that want the intensive background check.
Push back. Yeah. And inform your grant writers. Mm-hmm.
Didn't we pass something in Oregon not that very long ago that was supposed to make that process easier? I think there's a law.
Does that ring a bell to anybody? I'm not from here. Ban the box state. Okay.
So I just had a comment about supervision. We can go back to supervision.
So we're kind of, losing a little bit. Well, what I'm hearing is like, yes, this is a very real thing And there should be a simple answer, right? There's not yet. So what do? We inform our grant writers. We continue to bring up these conversations. We make those small changes. This wonderful gentleman up here said, this is the lived experience. So we need these folks. We need these people. Say those things out loud. Don't be afraid to voice it and say, how do you expect that we're going to actually connect with this population? If you're worried about funding, we're not going to get to them anyways. That these are the things that it's going to take for us to actually be able to serve this population. Keep advocating, track those things, saying we've had these applicants. Since we lost these applicants, we have had this many people that they could have connected with that didn't get the service that they deserved because we couldn't get them to pass a background check. So start tracking those things and keep good documentation, good record keeping around those things of what gets in your way and your efforts to push back. Yeah. Yeah.
Lucky. I work for Central City Concern, and it's been amazing. And she's in a place where I'm the first peer for their program. And so she's learning from me, which is an amazing place to be at. But one of the places you talked about, like micromanaging, or somebody was talking about that, that's where, like, when we talk about billing and documentation, and then suddenly, like, then there's micromanaging, like how, and that's, of course, has to do with funding. But I feel like the system, we just don't fit into that box, and I wish it could change.
And it can. It can. Maybe not right this second, but it can. Another quick kind of poll. Who in here is billing peer services through Medicaid? If you don't know, then you're not doing it. That's okay. That's okay. This has been a big topic of conversation. Do we have a question? Or
No, go ahead.
Okay. That's been a big topic of conversation. Is there's been this excitement of, if we can bill Medicaid for peer services, then we're going to have this increased need, that we can see more legitimacy, and we can get, more peer positions created and funded and all this great stuff. But I know my big concern has been Medicaid documentation has to be so specific and tied to particular codes. And so it can get really, really not peer-centered. And so it's like, how do we balance that? And there's got to be a way to do it. So that's why I was trying to see who's in Medicaid. I've been wanting to pick people's brains about that forever. Yeah.
Just really quick, there's a light in that tunnel. My youngest sister traveled around with trauma-informed care for a handful of years. She got hired on a Pacific Corp in Bend to teach them trauma-informed care, to try to work to change the codes.
Love that. Fantastic. See, there are people.
So I don't know, we got about 15 minutes left here.
Yep.
So.
I see in the chat, somebody says we use the dimensions of wellness, which gives us a very broad umbrella. Absolutely. So yes, if you're asking, how do we document? What guidelines are we using? There's a lot of that work that's already been done. Mental Health America, National Association of Peer Supporters, SAMHSA, they have these guidelines. So if you're being told to do one thing, come back right at it and say, well, this is what best practices for peer support looks like. So unless you can tell me why we have to do it differently, why are we not doing it this way? Ask those hard questions, because a lot of times people, again, they don't know what they don't know. So if nobody's asking these questions and saying, I don't know why we do it this way, it's always been done this way, we can change that, right? Just because it is doesn't mean it always shall be. Again, you have this leverage, you have this knowledge, you can train, you can mentor, you can be these really solid team members, and it's not working for free. And this is something I've always kind of come up against, again, because I think as peer specialists, we all share kind of the same heart, the same compassion of like, I'd be willing to sacrifice parts of myself and my own boundaries if it reaches somebody who really needs it. And we want to be that, we want to do that. But is it sustainable? It's really not. I'm notorious for not being a Band-Aid person. I talk about this in my team all the time. If we're trying to solve problems and they're like, we're so tired of doing this thing over and over and over again. I'm like, we could put a Band-Aid on it. We could do a quick fix, but it's going to wear out. So what is our long-term solution? And is it really going to benefit just the now or the long term? And being able to kind of sit with those, it's tough. Again, you're not alone. I encourage build relationships with people from other programs, because somebody's going to have an idea. Somebody's going to have a long-term fix that we just haven't thought of yet or didn't know is within our power. You had something and then you told me to go on. You're from Arizona. Yeah. Some people have only ever known billing under Medicaid for peer services. Yeah. You do. Yes. Yes, I've heard of that amazing program. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're supposed to be in your recovery for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Yes. I love those programs. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Mhm. Exactly. We need to, all of us need to continue to push back, right? That we can own our space and say, this is why it works, right? If we need these people, this is the stuff that works. This is the stuff that doesn't work. So for those on Zoom, he was talking about these peer support programs that start within the prisons. And they credential and they train people while they're still incarcerated to be peer specialists. And then they can serve inside while they're working with other inmates. And then once they are released, they can get peer support specialist jobs and have that experience. It's really incredible. Somebody presented on that in Peer Apocalypse, I think like 2 years ago. Yeah. That was you. See, it's a pleasure to meet you. That stuck with me. We reference that all the time. All right. I know we're almost out of time. So I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. But again, knowing when we're getting in our own way. So catching those thought trains. I want to help as many people as possible with their recovery. To do that, I need to maintain enough wellness to come to work to provide quality support. Large caseloads, inadequate support, and low pay do not contribute to my wellness and do not empower me to own what I deserve. Right? The work that we do is crucial, essential, wildly impactful, and does not require the sacrifice of mind, body, and soul. We have to keep this perspective if we want to be a sustainable workforce. We don't have to play the game that's out there. We don't have to be part of that grind culture. We can stop. We can say, no, we're not going to do this as a professional group of people. We're not going to put up with this. Is anybody, Glennon Doyle, I kind of stole this from her a little bit. She talked about as a mother, the kind of thing as in mothering today as being the queen of Martyrdom Mountain, and being like, oh, I take so much on, and it's just being a mom, that's what it is. And I think we as peers can get in that too. So no more being the martyrs of that, of being the kings of Martyrdom Mountain, rather the diplomats of Balance Island, and pushing for that, having those conversations that my work-life balance is really important. This is what it looks like. This is what I need. Reinforce. Because yes, people are suffering and we want to get to them, and they will continue to suffer if we can't establish effective, consistent, and sustainable support. I've seen it time and time again, where our peer specialists, they're doing their job, they're not getting the support they need, so they're leaving. Well, what's happening to the person that they were supporting? That's reinforcing the idea that they're not going to get the consistent support that they need, so they're creating more problems. If we could just keep these people where they need to be, we're going to see much more success. So breaking those cycles, and we as peer specialists can absolutely do that. So we talked, a few things: working on your job descriptions, working on your hiring practices, working on your data collection, advocating to be supervised by peer identified individuals. If you're doing all that, what are some other things you can do? Participate in these budget discussions. What's being talked about when you're not there? Advocating for the needs of your peer team. How much money is going towards training them in continuing education, certifications, salary? That's been a big thing. If you continue to talk about it, hopefully they'll eventually listen. I can only speak from my experience, but I've been pushing it for the last several years. And just in October, we had there was a conversation about, we had this kind of surplus in our budget, which I know is not something that happens very often, so I'll own the privilege there. But they're like, well, what do we do with this money? And I was like, pay the peers more. And they did. They brought everybody up to the same salary. And so now we're looking at, we were able to bring everybody up, some a lot, some a little. But that reestablished kind of the baseline for what we wanted to pay our peers, and are now going to be able to kind of stack on that with experience and certification, all that kind of stuff. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been in that meeting, because nobody was out looking out for us in that way. Maybe they would have, but I couldn't guarantee that. So where are those conversations happening? Who isn't there that needs to be? It's probably you. Changing from the clinical to peer perspective wherever you can, leaving your mark on your organization. So looking at your electronic health records, your intake, your referrals, your assessments, changing the language and being an advocate for that can be so impactful, because it's establishing this is our standard of what the care and the person-centered approach is. So we did a health needs assessment. It's been a few months, but I worked with the clinical care managers, and we worked together on some of these different aspects of the health needs assessment. And we were able to tweak some of the wording so that it wasn't so insensitive, for one thing, or so stigmatizing. Like it was like as simple as, is English your first language? Instead of saying, because that's deficit, right? If it's not your first language, well, why isn't it? Saying, what is your primary language, right? So just tweaking and changing things so it's more inclusive, strengths-based. I rarely ever use the word staff when it comes to my team. I don't like it because it is hierarchical a lot of the time. So just using those little changes, like my team. We don't refer to our peers as clients. In our electronic health record, our care managers do have client contact. We have peer support contact. So putting your foot down and saying, this is not what I'm doing. If client or this part of the language, this clinical language is part of my documentation, it should stop. What can we change it to instead? Participants, exactly. Create, lead, facilitate trainings with a peer lens. So a lot of places you have to have ongoing trainings, right? Yearly, I know my organization, we have to do a trauma informed, a cultural competency, a 2-gen training. Get peers, do that. You know it, you know the information. Why are we not presenting on it? We had, this happened when I was on maternity leave, so I got to hear about it. But they had somebody come present on like a suicide risk assessment, and it was so triggering for not just my team, but for some of the care managers as well. And I was like, if I had been there, we could have had one of our peer specialists who had a background in creating their own survivor network from in their community and been doing support groups for survivors of suicide attempts for like 10 years. Like, why are we not using these people who are actually know this material and are living this stuff? So assert yourself, saying, you know, you want cultural competency, let's actually get people in who know the stuff or that it impacts them. Strengths-based language. Oh, that's my bread and butter. We have so many conversations about, is that the best way we can say it? Probably not. How are we learning? How are we holding each other accountable? Advocate for program evaluations. So get some outside help as you're collecting this data. If they're like, say, I need more help around this, that if we want more funding, if we want to increase the populations or the number of folks, I need somebody to help me look at all of this from a different perspective. We had the opportunity to have somebody do a program evaluation, and we pulled out, it was a pretty significant number. I'm not sure exactly how that came to be. Math is not my strong suit, but she was able to pull out that in our program, individuals who had a peer specialist were 2.5 times more likely to successfully graduate from a program than someone who wasn't. And I know it probably doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it really is. I mean, it's a huge gap, and just somebody being able to see that objective and present that information. I had our leadership team knocking down my door saying, how do we get this more? Why is this happening? Why is this so successful? And so I was able to be like, well, I'd love to tell you, but I need more people. So we were able to grow our team to open up bandwidth. I'd love to do this for you, but I need A, B, and C in order to do it. But because a lot of times it comes down to the bottom line for folks. So appeal to that, use that, leverage what you know. Establish strong team culture and expectations. Take care of each other, take care of your teams, connect with one another. A lot of times they don't want you to, they'll get in the way. I hear that all the time. It's like they don't let us, or we don't have time. We're so overloaded. We have so much work to do. There's no time to connect with one another. Put your foot down and say, no, this is what I need. Try and figure out what that looks like. Be each other's allies in the workforce. Most importantly, keep asking questions. Keep looking for these power vacuums that if somebody isn't answering it, you can answer. You can decide what those answers are. You can establish what those expectations are. Keep kicking ass, because that's what you're doing. Keep doing it. Okay, right? 3 o'clock. All right. Thank you all so much.
Can you share your email in the chat for the people that
Yes.
want the slideshow?
Yes, I will put my email in that chat.
And
This has been recorded, so I can probably submit the slides to be attached to it. I feel like that's what they've done before. So when you're able
Sure.
to view, they should be
the
uploaded.
word for the CEUs
Ooh,
is goldenrod.
The secret word is
Goldenrod.
goldenrod. But thank you all so much. I appreciate your patience with me. This is my first time on this particular thing.
Thank you, Brianna. You were great.
But if I can do it, you can do it. Go out, keep doing what you're doing. Be amazing. You're the ones making it happen. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise.
Thank you.